The Earth. The thinness of the Earth's crust testifies to a recent creation and nullifies the concept of an old one. Interesting. Just observation can give us the biblical account as the accurate one. If the Earth is as old as claimed, the emission of volcanic materials at present rates would have produced a volume of material equal to or greater than the volume of rock in all the continents of the world. This is the basis of J.T. Wilson's remarkable theory that the Earth's crust has developed in just this way. The emission of lava at the present rate of 0.8 kilometers per every 3-year period throughout the Earth's history at 4.5 times 109 years, or even for the 3 times 109 years since the oldest known rocks were formed, would have poured out lava of the order of 3 times 109 kilometers on the Earth's surface. This corresponds approximately to the volume of the continents. A slightly higher rate of volcanism in the early stages of the Earth would allow for the emission of the oceanic crust as well. T.J. Tuzo Wilson, Geophysics and Continental Growth, American scientist. Surely the idea that all the rock and soil materials of all the Earth's crust have been built up by volcanic emissions during geologic time is no less strange in terms of traditional uniformitarianism than is the deluge theory. Although, as we've emphasized, volcanic lavas are of great extent over the Earth's surface, they nevertheless constitute a relatively small portion of all rocks. Wilson's supposition is that the granites and other rocks were originally lavas, which have since been eroded and metaforced from their original condition. This theory is quite speculative, of course, and has not yet attracted any great following. Nevertheless, the arithmetical calculations lead to such conclusions. In fact, more realistic calculations would show that the continents could have been derived by volcanic action in much less time than 4.5 billion years. Now, this figure is based on an average lava emission of 0.8 kilometers per year, but this latter figure was taken from work by Sapper, which in turn was based on lava flows since 1500 AD. But it is apparent that this rate must be much less than the average rate during the geologic time in view of the vastly greater extent of volcanic activity in the past and in the present. Even on the basis of present activity, however, this seems low. The materials, lava and ash, derived from Perukutun during its 10 years of activity were over 2,000 million cubic meters in volume, which therefore averaged 0.2 cubic kilometers per year. Thus, only 4 such volcanoes would produce Wilson's 0.8 cubic kilometers per year. If, as we have surmised, the minimum average figure should be at least 1,000 volcanoes, then the above estimate of age would be reduced from 4.5 billion years to less than 20 million years. And this on the assumption that all the Earth's crust developed uniformly in this manner. There's another point. The amount of pressure in underground oil reserves testifies to a young Earth. Dr. Don Patton, in his tape, he looked at the pressure in the oil reserves and he says that the Earth's age is less than 10,000 years. You've got tremendous pressures there, and that's why you have the gushers sometimes very dramatically blowing debris into the atmosphere. We can measure the porosity of the rocks. We know how much pressure they'll hold for how long. and we find that the pressure will hold for just a few thousand years, and yet there's the pressure still there today. Conclusion: methods of time measurement. We have now discussed a number of lines of evidence that seem plainly to show that the estimate of 4 or 5 billion years for the age of the Earth must be much too great. Such diversified processes as the fall of meteorites, the breakup of comets, the influx of dissolved chemicals into the ocean, the escape of helium into the atmosphere, the growth of the ocean, and the growth of continents by volcanism all give ages much less than this. And this is on the basis of the geologist's own principle of uniformitarianism. Obviously, in terms of the revealed facts of an initial grown creation and the great discontinuity in all natural processes at the time of the deluge, even these later ages must be too large. Just how much too great is as impossible to determine by scientific calculation as it is to determine the true age of the Earth by any other of the radioactive minerals. Once again, we emphasize that the only certain basis of prehistoric chronology must come by way of divine revelation. Too many variables, not enough historicity. People weren't around long enough to measure things. This revelation in the Bible records a creation and a subsequent universal flood, both occurring only a few thousand years ago. And nothing in true science can possibly negate this, nor in fact, when the data are rightly understood, does it even seem to do so. Don Patton goes on. We'll look at the illustrations given by William Stansfield, Professor of Biological Sciences, California Polytech. Now, he is an evolutionist. He is an anti-creationist. He debates against creationism. He is very strongly opposed to the idea that the Earth is young. But he acknowledges that there are some strong indications of a young age for the Earth. For example, he cites water from volcanoes. It produces juvenile water. He said that it indicates the Earth is less than 500 million years old. He says that we've got about 600 active volcanoes around the world, and just producing at that rate of the average would fill the oceans with water in about 4.5 billion years. Now, the 600 we've got would do it in about 500 million. We talked about the helium in the atmosphere. He said that the age, that indicates an age of about less than 150 million years. I think the figures indicate an age of less than 10,000. But even his dates certainly don't fit with the billions of years that are required for the evolutionist. He talked about lavas from volcanoes and points out that 4 volcanoes at the average rate of lava flow could produce the Earth's crust in 4 billion years. Yet we have 600 of them going, active in the world today. And we know that the volcanic activity was much greater in the past. We talked about uranium accumulation. It's about 1,000 times faster than it's being depleted from the ocean. It's accumulating rapidly. He said that that indicates an age of less than 1 million. He looked at the pressure in the oil reserves, and he says that the Earth's age is less than 10,000. You've got tremendous pressures there, and that's why you have gushers, sometimes very dramatically blowing debris into the atmosphere. We can measure the porosity of the rocks, and we know how much pressure they'll hold for how long. We find that the pressure will hold for just a few thousand years, and yet there's the pressure still there today. We looked at population dynamics. and we find that in 2 million years, supposed to be the age of man, increasing at the population rate with only 2 people beginning, you get to about 102,700, which is just a ridiculous number of people on the earth. Just an infinitesimal portion of that, Stanfield says, is what we have on the earth today. Meteoritic dust, millions of tons per year coming to the earth. Where is it? No indication of it in the strata. There's good ways to detect it from the nickel. We talked about radiocarbon in the atmosphere. He says that indicates the earth is less than 20,000 years old. It only takes 30,000 years to reach equilibrium, and it's 30% short. I think his figures are conservative. But he acknowledges that there are a lot of indications that indicate that the earth is young. But he has an answer for that. Of course, he doesn't believe in these indications, and his answer is seen as we continue to look at a quotation in his book, The Science of Evolution. He says, by this methodology, creationists should stand guilty of the crime they ascribe to evolutionists, namely uniformitarianism. That is, assuming everything remains the same. All of the above methods for dating the age of the earth, its various strata, are questionable because the rates are likely to have fluctuated widely over our history, he said. A method that appears to have greater reliability for determining absolute ages of rocks is that of radiometric dating. But then he goes on to critique that in the last paragraph he says, if I think that's a big if, we assume that a rock, see, go ahead and move this up a little bit. Contained no lead-206 when it was formed. All lead-206 now in the rock was produced by radioactive decay of U-238. Of course, we know that's not the case. The rate of decay has been constant, and good reason to question that. There has been no differential leaching by water of either element, and we know that happens. And no U-238 has been transported into the rock from another source. And I would add, that this has been constant for billions of years, which really makes it extreme then. He says, with all of these assumptions then, we might expect our estimate of age to be fairly accurate. Each assumption is a potential variable, the magnitude of which can seldom be ascertained. Well, I'll accept his conclusion regarding this. And notice the next paragraph, which I think is a fair assessment of the reasonableness of these assumptions. He says that radiometric techniques may not be the absolute dating methods that they had been claimed to be. Age estimates on a given geological stratum by different radiometric methods are often quite different, not predictable. In cases where the daughter product is a gas, as in the decay of potassium K40 to the gas argon, it is essential that none of the gas escapes from the rock over long periods of time. Otherwise, the results are skewed. It is obvious that radiometric methods are not quite often different, sometimes by hundreds of millions of years. That's a little bit. There is no absolutely reliable long-term radiological clock. Well, we don't really know the beginning conditions, and we know we don't. And when we don't observe over the period of time, but just a short portion of the period of time, because we don't live that long, and extrapolate over billions of years, then we know we don't know. Actually, when the creationists have more methods and extrapolate over a shorter period, then their conclusions ought to be more scientifically valid. When you look at the actual evidence, there is much stronger, valid scientific evidence for concluding that the Earth is young. You have to